The sun hung low over the Montana dust, stretching the shadows of men and horses across the dry earth. The air was thick with heat and the smell of sweat and disappointment. Elias Crowe stood by the auction fence, his hat brim pulled low, eyes hollow from too many seasons of loss. Around him, laughter echoed, sharp, careless, young. He used to sound that way once. Now he just listened as a scrawny gray horse limped into the pen, ribs showing through its matted coat. One eye was clouded, the other too tired to fight. The auctioneer's voice rose, half bored, half cruel. What we got here's fit for the glue pot. Maybe 2 bits for the hide. A few men chuckled. Dust swirled, glinting gold in the evening light, and Elias felt a tug deep inside his chest, a strange ache of recognition. He had seen that look before, in his own reflection after his wife's passing. He didn't mean to bid. The word slipped from his throat before his pride could stop it. $2. The crowd went still, then burst into laughter. Crowe's lost his damn mind, someone jeered. Elias only nodded once, handed over his last crumpled bills, and led the old horse away from the noise. The walk home took hours. The plains stretched wide and colorless beneath a burning orange sky. The horse limped beside him, each step a prayer of endurance. Grasshoppers leapt from his path. Wind whispered through dead sage. Elias hummed a tune his wife used to sing, a soft, trembling sound swallowed by the horizon. By the time they reached the ranch, dusk had fallen. The place looked smaller than he remembered, fences slanted, the barn leaning like an old drunk. Inside, dust clung to every beam. He poured a bucket of water for the horse, then stood watching as the animal drank slow and careful, as if tasting hope. You and me, Elias muttered, brushing its neck. We're both past our worth. Later that evening, the clip-clop of hooves broke the stillness. Mara Langley appeared at the fence, a lantern swinging from her saddle horn. Her eyes caught the light, soft and kind. She'd lost her husband 2 winters ago in the mining collapse, yet still carried herself with quiet grace. He's got fight left, she said, nodding at the horse. You did right. Elias looked away, uncomfortable with kindness. Ain't much right left to do, he said. Mara smiled, leaving a burlap sack by the gate. Kindness always finds its way back, she whispered, before turning into the dark. The night wind hummed through broken boards. Coyotes called from far ridges. Elias lay awake listening, feeling a strange warmth where shame usually lived. In the stall, the gray horse shifted, as if dreaming that by morning, the world had turned against him again. At the saloon, laughter spilled from behind swinging doors. Crowe bought himself a ghost horse. A man shouted, $2 for a carcass. The crowd roared. Sheriff Harlan Pike leaned on the bar, his eyes weary with old friendship. Elias, he said quietly, don't let pity drown what's left of you. Elias met his gaze, said nothing, and walked out. He found Mara at her store, sweeping the porch. She didn't mention the gossip, only handed him a jar of salve for the horse's wound. Some creatures just need someone to look twice, she said. Her voice carried a tremor, something between memory and faith. That evening, as the sun fell red behind the pines, Elias cleaned the horse's legs and rubbed the salve into its skin. Dusty, he decided to call him. The name fit, color of storms long past. The animal flinched at first, then eased into the touch. Elias felt it too, the quiet pull of something mending. Days passed in slow rhythm. Morning light over frost, the steady scrape of a shovel, the creak of the windmill. Each evening, Dusty stood a little straighter. Elias would find himself talking to him, telling stories he hadn't spoken aloud in years. How his wife used to braid wildflowers into her hair, how the rain stopped and never came back. The horse listened, or at least stood as if it mattered. Mara began visiting more often, bringing small things, feed, bread, a laugh that felt like sunlight through cloud. She'd brush Dusty's mane while Elias fixed a broken hinge, and for a few minutes the silence between them was comfortable, like 2 old souls resting. One night she told him about her husband's last letter, how it spoke of digging toward hope even when the mind grew dark. You keep digging, she said softly, even if you don't know what you'll find. It was near dawn when Elias first noticed something strange. Dusty, usually still and quiet, had wandered to the far side of the pasture, pawing at the ground like he sensed something buried. Elias watched, puzzled, then followed. Beneath the thin crust of soil, the earth was damp, a surprise in a land that hadn't known rain in months. Dusty snorted, pawing harder until his hoof struck a shallow hollow near an old stone well long abandoned. Elias knelt and scraped the dirt away. In the weak morning light, something flickered, tiny gold flecks glinting in the mud that he froze. The air thickened. Couldn't be real. Not here. He scooped a handful of soil, rubbed it between his fingers. The shimmer remained. For a long moment, all he could hear was his own breath and the soft snort of the horse beside him. "Well now," he whispered, heart pounding. "What are you trying to tell me, old friend?" He covered the hole again, hands shaking. The thought of fortune made him uneasy. He'd buried too many dreams already. That night, under a sky full of stars, Elias stood by the barn and looked at Dusty grazing by the fence. The moonlight turned the horse's coat almost silver, his shape ghostly against the fields. Elias felt something stir in his chest, not greed, not even hope, but a strange sense of destiny. As if the broken things he'd gathered in pity were leading him towards something he wasn't meant to find until now. He whispered into the quiet, "Guess there's still secrets left in this old land." The horse lifted his head and breathed, slow and steady, like he understood, and for the first time in years, Elias Crowe let himself believe that maybe not all lost things stay buried forever. Days turned warmer, and the wind softened, but Elias felt a restlessness growing like a storm behind calm skies. Every dawn, he found himself at the old well again, tracing the earth where Dusty had pawed. More flecks of gold winked back at him from the dirt, too many to ignore, too bright to dismiss as luck. He filled a small pouch, heart thundering in his chest. He tried to hide the shimmer beneath his hat brim, but in a town like Whetstone, secrets were a kind of currency. By week's end, the whispers began. A boy had seen Elias digging by lantern light. By morning, men were already talking. Crows found something. They said over coffee and whiskey. That old horse of his must have led him to a strike. Bo Ellis showed up that evening, a grin like a knife. "Heard you've been digging, Crow," he drawled, leaning against the gate. "Find something worth selling?" Elias kept his voice even. "Just rocks and old ghosts." Bo chuckled, eyes gleaming. "Funny thing about ghosts, they tend to guard treasure." When the dust settled from his horse's hooves, Elias stood alone again, feeling the first edge of fear. Mara came the next morning, hair pulled back, worry etched between her brows. "They're sniffing around, Elias. You can't hide truth long out here. It walks with its own wind." She looked at Dusty, then back to him. "Whatever that horse found, you need to be careful. Men lose themselves chasing glitter." He nodded, though his stomach was tight with unease. "I ain't chasing anything," he said softly. "Seems more like something found me." That night, he brought Dusty into the barn, brushing the gray coat under lamplight. The horse shifted, restless, eyes reflecting gold. Elias noticed something. Thin scars along the shoulder, half buried under years of dust and hair. He brushed gently, revealing the faint shape of a brand. A mark, circular, with an emblem burned deep long ago. That he frowned, heart quickening. He'd seen that symbol before. The next morning, he rode into town with Dusty and called for Sheriff Pike. Together, they washed away the dirt until the mark showed clear, the crest of the Sundown Mining Company, gone these 15 years. Pike's face turned grave. "That mine collapsed," the sheriff said quietly. "Killed 37 men. The foreman vanished after. Took the payroll in gold, or so they said. Never found his body." Elias stared at the brand, the old scars gleaming in the sunlight. "You think this horse belonged to him?" "Looks like it," Pike murmured. "If he went missing, maybe the horse wandered off. And now it's wandered home." The world seemed to tilt. The flecks of gold Dusty had uncovered, the restless pawing, it wasn't random. The horse had been there, had known, maybe had seen that man's final fall. Mara arrived while they talked, her face pale as the truth sank in. "My husband died in that same collapse," she whispered. "If that mine's close by, it means those men never found peace." Elias looked down at Dusty, whose cloudy eye reflected nothing but light. A creature once discarded as worthless had carried the memory of the dead and the path to something long buried. That night, Elias couldn't sleep. He saddled Dusty and rode out under a crescent moon, guided by instinct more than direction. The plains shimmered silver, the stars sharp as nails. Dusty stopped near a ridge, nostrils flaring, pawing again. Elias slid from the saddle, knelt, and began to dig. The earth gave way easily, revealing old timbers and a dark shaft half collapsed. The smell of rust and earth filled his lungs. A mine entrance, forgotten, but not lost. He stood there for a long time, torn between wonder and dread. He knew the gold was real now, but so was the sorrow it was buried under. The next evening, Bo Ellis and his 2 hired men returned. Their silhouettes appeared at sundown, black against the orange sky. "Evenin', Crowe," Bo said, stepping off his horse, hand resting near his revolver. "We heard you've been digging again." Elias didn't reach for his gun. "You're trespassing," he said, voice steady. Bo's smile thinned. "You're sitting on a fortune, old man. You really think you can keep that from us?" The silence that followed was thick as molasses. A hawk cried overhead, the only witness. Elias shook his head. "That gold's not mine. It belongs to ghosts and the families they left behind." Bo's eyes hardened. "Then I guess we'll just have to collect on their behalf." The barn door creaked open as they moved closer. Dusty stepped forward, ears back, sensing the danger. The first shot cracked the air, deafening. Elias dove behind a post, returning fire once. Sparks flew from metal. Bo's men closed in. Dusty reared, hoofs flashing, striking one of them hard enough to send him sprawling. Another shot echoed, then a cry. When the smoke cleared, the sheriff's voice boomed through the night. "Drop your guns." Pike and Mara rode in from the road, lanterns swinging. Bo hesitated, then ran. Pike fired once into the dirt at his feet, forcing him still. Elias stumbled to his feet, chest heaving. Then he saw it, Dusty standing still, a dark bloom spreading across his side. The bullet had found him. Elias rushed forward, falling to his knees beside the horse. "No, no." His hands pressed over the wound. Useless against the bleeding, Dusty's breathing slowed. The world shrank to the sound of his heartbeat. The smell of hay and iron. "You showed me what worth means," Elias whispered through tears. "And it ain't gold." The sheriff's lantern light flickered over them. Mara knelt beside Elias, her hand trembling on his shoulder. "He brought something back to life," she said softly, "and not just the land." When morning came, the men were taken away in irons. Dusty was buried near the old well, under the same sky that had seen his last stand. Elias carved a wooden marker himself, rough and simple. Dusty, the horse that remembered. Spring came like forgiveness. The mine was opened again, not for greed, but for justice. Sheriff Pike made sure the gold went to the families of the men lost long ago. Elias refused any share. Instead, he donated his land to rebuild the orphanage and the miners' chapel in Mara's husband's name. Weeks later, he found Mara standing by the corral, watching the sunrise turn the fields to gold. "You gave up everything," she said quietly. He smiled faintly. "Wasn't mine to keep." She looked at him then, really looked, and smiled back. There were no declarations, no need. Just the soft rustle of grass and the steady beat of 2 hearts learning to trust the world again. A young colt, Dusty's offspring, nudged Elias's arm. He ran his hand along its neck, eyes distant but gentle. "Guess your pa left you something finer than gold," he said. Then he mounted and rode toward the horizon, hat low against the rising light. And as the prairie wind carried his figure into the morning haze, a voice seemed to linger in the air, old as the hills, gentle as mercy. "Out here, time don't remember who was rich or poor, only who was kind. Sometimes the world hides its gold beneath the broken, waiting for one weary soul to see worth where others see waste." Elias Crowe bought an old horse out of pity, but what he truly found was the vein of grace that runs deeper than gold and shines longest in the heart that learns to forgive.